Mr. Robin Myers was convicted of capital murder charges in Morgan County, Alabama in 1994 for a crime that occurred in 1991. The jury recommended 9-3 that Mr. Myers be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. However, the judge overrode the jury's recommendation and sentenced Mr. Myers to death. Today, Mr. Myers sits on death row at Holman Correctional Facility awaiting execution. This video is being presented to the governor of Alabama with the hope that you will grant Mr. Myers clemency and uphold the jury's original intent and allow Mr. Myers to live. This clemency video presents 3 areas of which Mr. Myers bases his clemency request. First, Mr. Myers met the clinical definition of intellectual disability prior to age 18. Because of this, his execution is prohibited as it violates the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution. In Atkins v. Virginia, the United States Supreme Court held that based on evolving national standard, those determined to be intellectually disabled could not be executed. Second, Mr. Myers is not guilty of the crime for which he sits on death row. Robin Myers was not the original suspect in the October 5, 1991 murder of Mrs. Ludie Mae Tucker. Immediately after the murder of Mrs. Tucker, the police canvassed the neighborhood for information on the crimes. Just a few days later, the police had 3 witnesses, Patrick Butch Madden, Willie Hitman Raybon, and Angela Ackland, all claiming that Anthony Coolbreeze Ballantyne had committed the murder. Strong evidence supported that theory. Ballantyne was a crack addict who habitually bought crack from Madden. Police would eventually discover witnesses placed Ballantyne at the crack house on the evening of Mrs. Tucker's murder, trading a VCR for crack. Ackland stated that around 11 p.m., as she sat on her porch, she saw a black man who she recognized as Ballantyne run between the house next to hers and a church on the other side. He was wearing a bloody white shirt and black jeans. While there are conflicting accounts of Ballantyne's specific itinerary on the night of Mrs. Tucker's murder, every witness agreed that Ballantyne was wearing a white shirt, and 2 out of the 3 witnesses described the shirt as bloody. These descriptions match the ones Mrs. Tucker gave the police of her attacker. Witnesses confirmed Ballantyne's presence at Madden's crack house 3 times on the night of the murder. Madden and Raybon stated that on Ballantyne's first visit, he purchased a $20 rock of crack. Sometime before 11 p.m., Ballantyne returns. At that time, Madden refused Ballantyne's desperate demands for crack on credit. As he was leaving, Ballantyne argued with Raybon about a debt and promised he would be back. On the 3rd visit, Ballantyne was moving swiftly, sweating, shaking, and paranoid at this time. Ballantyne had a big VCR with him, and he traded it for crack. The police questioned Ballantyne about the murder. He lied repeatedly. He denied ever using cocaine. He denied knowing Madden. He denied buying drugs on the night of the murder and falsely claimed he was home all evening. Despite his claims of innocence, Ballantyne was arrested and charged with murder, not capital murder, in Mrs. Tucker's death. A month later, Tyrone Elliott, a dishwasher at the Decatur County Club who worked for Ballantyne's father, spoke to Jerry McDaniel, a private investigator working for Ballantyne. Mr. McDaniel told Elliott the governor was offering a reward for information in the murder of Mrs. Tucker. With that incentive, Elliott told police on October 5th he saw a short, stocky black male dressed in dark clothing coming from the area of Mrs. Tucker's house carrying a VCR. Elliott later saw that man trade the VCR for crack. Elliott denied Ballantyne was the man he saw. Armed with Elliott's story, the police re-interviewed Madden and Raybon. Both men recanted their original statements, and for the first time, both implicated Robin Myers. Police released Ballantyne and in his place charged Mr. Myers, not with murder, but with capital murder. But no forensic evidence connected Mr. Myers to the crime. Back then, Mr. Myers was under a doctor's care for severe eczema, which caused his very dry skin to readily flake off. So, if Mr. Myers had been present at Mrs. Tucker's house on the evening of her death, his skin condition surely would have indicated it. But police collected no forensic evidence from the crime scene or the victim's clothing that linked anything to Mr. Myers. Even absent such evidence, Robin Myers was convicted of capital murder for Mrs. Ludie Mae Tucker's death, which now meant that Robin Myers was facing the death penalty. Mr. Myers' conviction was obtained solely on unreliable testimony from drug dealers and drug addicts, many of whom made multiple conflicting statements. Much of this testimony could have been refuted at trial had Mr. Myers received effective representation. Further, post-conviction investigation has produced evidence and testimony that demonstrates each person who testified against Mr. Myers lied. The third point on which Mr. Myers bases this clemency request is that the jury who sat through Mr. Myers' trial and through the penalty phase adjudged that the appropriate penalty was life without the possibility of parole. A single judge who is subject to re-election overrode that decision. At the time of his trial, only 3 states even allowed judicial override, but Alabama stood alone in allowing this type of standardless judicial override. In the other 2 states, the judge was required to demonstrate significant reasons for why he or she is choosing to override the jury's decision.
My name is Maylin Puckett, and I live in Decatur, Alabama. I served on a jury for Rocky Myers' capital murder. I took my job very seriously. Some people had their mind made up before we went in of his guilt, and we knew that we tried, and we knew that we could not change their mind. Some of us felt like he was innocent. We never saw the evidence that linked him to the crime. It wasn't there. But we only had certain choices that we could make, and we reluctantly voted guilty, life without parole, in order to save his life. We felt like he was a good father. His children loved him. We wanted him to have a good connection. We voted for him to be alive. And that judge did not have the right, I feel like, did not have the right to just decide to put him to death. He did not have a fair trial. It was more or less predetermined when it started, and that's the way it turned out. And he's now on death row. And I asked to please spare his life because he did not commit that crime, and he is an innocent man. I know that you know how to pray, and when you have the chance to look at these videos, I just ask that you stay that you stay in that mindset of prayer and meditation, and search your heart for the answers.
Lorraine did have a lot on her plate, and she had a lot of children, and it was hard to deal with each one of them.
When he got paid on Friday, he would disappear until Sunday evening, leaving Lorraine. She would have to call her father to bring food to them so that they can eat.
They would be crying. My sister-in-law and the children, they went through a lot, you know. My sister-in-law had 10 kids, and I would go over there, you know, sometimes I couldn't believe it. She had babies on each leg. She had them young, at 14 years old. She had no time, no one to help. There was a time that she was so depressed that she sat on the edge of the bed. She was in such a deep depression. She sat there with her eyes wide open and didn't even blink.
Rocky came up with a hard life, big family, and a father who wasn't there to help him through this.
Rocky was a misunderstood, gentle person. He didn't excel like his brothers did.
Mental retardation is a disability that's characterized by significant limitations in intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior, and this disability originates before age 18. My name is Kristen Treble. My clinical work focuses on neuropsychological assessment. I was trained as a neuropsychologist. Individuals with mental retardation have decreased abilities to understand and to process information. There are 3 criteria that must be met for a diagnosis of mental retardation. The first is that there must be current IQ scores of around 70 or as high as 75, indicating a limitation in intellectual functioning. Second, there must be limitations in adaptive behavior. Adaptive functioning refers to how well individuals cope with common life demands and how independent they are. The DSM-4 requires at least 2 areas of adaptive functioning to be impaired in order for mental retardation to be diagnosed. These include communication, self-care, home living, social and interpersonal skills, use of community resources, self-direction, functional academic skills, work, leisure, and health and safety. And then third, this intellectual disability must have began before the age of 18, which is during the developmental period. And testimony from family and friends really was compelling for the presence of significant adaptive behavior deficits. These things include things such as basic literacy, time or temporal relationships. This is an area that Robin Myers is severely impaired. Mr. Myers was essentially illiterate. He could not read a letter or read a newspaper or read complex legal documents. He was unable to fill out job applications. He was completely dependent on his family and his friends to do all of this for him.
I helped him, you know, read or helping him to understand something, if it was a letter or read in a book.
Lorraine, his mother, would say to him, okay, read something to me that you have to study or do for homework. And Rocky would look at his mother and say, Mom, you have to do that. You know I can't read. And that's how he would reply. Then she would spend time teaching him and smacking him up in the back of the head because of the words that she would say didn't line up with what Rocky was saying.
So if we had a play or something for church to do, he memorized more so than read his script or his words.
One day when I was over their house, there was a paper on the coffee table that had like a picture and maybe the first letter of the word, and you fill in the rest of the blanks. And I thought it was Derek's, his youngest brother, because Derek was I don't know, 7, 8 at the time. But when I saw one, I don't remember the word, when I saw one of the words misspelled, I said to Derek that he misspelled it, and he told me that wasn't his, it was Rocky's. And that was the first time I knew that he didn't read well anyway.
Very deficient, if I can say that, you know, as from the other children.
Rocky did not go to school with us. So he would go to a school that they would call, oh, you have to ride the special ed bus, because it was a yellow bus. We didn't ride the yellow bus, so he felt kind of bad, and sometimes he would just leave and come back, because if you get teased a lot, it frustrates you, even as an adult. Well, now it's bullying. Back then it was just kids teasing kids.
When I was growing up, I had a lot of friends, you know, and he didn't hang around with us, anything like that. Rocky was more like, we had a dog named Duke. He would be with the dog and stuff like that. He didn't have friends when, you know, like he had boys hanging out with him and stuff like that. He didn't have stuff like that.
His ex-wife, Debbie Hood, also testified that Rocky could not fill out an application for welfare because he could not read it. So he was limited even on his access to community services. There were numerous reports from family and friends that he could not count change or manage money.
There was this corner store called Musty's, and he and I was in there, and we were actually getting lunch. I believe my mom gave me the money because she just didn't think or knew that Rocky could not handle the money.
But to purchase something, you would have to write a note for Rocky to understand it, and he would walk in the store and hand the piece of paper to the grocer or whatever you want to call them. To get the merchandise, they would have to read the note and bag up everything and then send it home. Oh, wait a minute, let me go back a little bit. One of the reasons my sister had a IOU account because Rocky couldn't count the change.
Another area of functional academic skill is just being able to tell time.
Up to the age of maybe 16, 17 years old, Rocky was not able to tell time. Even at the clock on the wall, it could be the largest numbers and hands on that clock, he still could not tell time.
Another area that was impaired, in my opinion, was self-direction. This refers to the ability of an individual to take initiative, to exercise self-discipline, and the ability to engage in goal-directed behaviors and task completion.
He was very slow. We would have to repeat ourselves several times. Or if he did answer, it didn't line up with the question, or he just his memory wasn't good at all.
You can even be having a conversation with him and he'll just bring up something else. I don't know. He had a very short attention span.
People had to sit there and observe him and supervise him doing a task to make sure that it got completed correctly or got finished.
Rocky was a drummer for the church choir. It was directed by my sister Lorraine. Rocky wasn't the best drummer, but to me, he was a very good drummer. But it just holding time into the beat that it was of the nature of the song that we were singing. And when you would try to tell him, Rocky had a thing about looking at you with a smile on his face, like, you know, I got this, I understand, but he would never change the beat of nothing. Took us time to really work with Rocky, and the beats were so simple to learn that my nephew would, when we were singing and we had to use him, he would reach behind him and with his hand, he would give him that beat, and then eventually Rocky caught on to it. But by the time the song was over, I'm sure Mickey's arm felt like he was going to fall off. But he did his best, really. I give him a lot of credit for it.
His wife testified that she had to wake him up every day. He didn't have that ability, that self-directed skills to be able to manage himself and get himself to work independently on his own. A third area that I believe was impaired in terms of adaptive skills was self-care.
You know, and he didn't keep himself clean. You know, he used to wet the bed and he'd get up and put his clothes on and go to school.
His hygiene was not the best. He smelled like urine. As far as him dressing himself, he dressed himself in some of the same dirty clothes he may have had on the day before. That was some of the reasons why his brothers teased him. It could be reasons why I had never seen him around outsiders too much. It was always a family thing.
And he used to, you know, feel a little embarrassed about it. That's about it. But
his clothes were in a plastic bag, like a garbage bag. And he would just yank something out of that, and the bag kind of smelled too, but we were going to see some girls. It was kind of difficult.
Last time I talked to him, he told me that his teeth was messed up because he never was the type of person that brushed his teeth all the time.
A fourth area that I believe that shows adaptive deficits is in the area of home living. Robin was able to cook simple meals such as like heat up a hot dog or a microwave dinner. However, he wasn't able to do anything more complicated because he couldn't read a recipe. He did not know how to use a washing machine. These are all abilities that a young adolescent would know how to do, but yet Rocky failed in this area of adaptive functioning.
As far as setting up a machine or doing any precision work, you know, I don't think he was capable of that. As far as reading measurements and things like that, but he was good with the labor part. You know, maybe perhaps loading a truck or unloading it or securing a load on a truck or something like that.
Social skills, fifth area of impairment, and this involves the interpersonal skills and social responsibility, self-esteem, gullibility, social problem solving, and he was very susceptible to being fooled or tricked, manipulated or lied to.
Yes, you could trick Rocky pretty easily. Rocky was no leader. He was always a follower. But he's done things while we were growing up that I knew he didn't want to do. He did it anyway, and like I said, I imagined to please people. Rocky had very little confidence in himself.
When individuals with intellectual or gullible, they may result in being taken advantage of or being made fun of without realizing it, or being talked into doing things without, fully understanding the consequences of those actions. My conclusion from all my review of the information is that Mr. Myers had mental retardation prior to age 18, and he continues to have mental retardation. Mr. Myers demonstrated consistently the presence of sub-average intellectual functioning. The only exception to this was Dr. Glenn King's results in 2006, which revealed a WAIS 3 full-scale IQ score of 84. This score is an outlier because it's outside the expected range even of error. I would give less weight to that score. There's a variety of issues that can come into play in terms of how the tests are administered, how items are queried. The problems that I found with Dr. King's assessment, first off, he relied on Robin's self-report of his own adaptive skills, which is not something that's clinically accepted. The proper way to assess adaptive behavior is to interview third parties, family or friends or teachers. Another issue was he did not measure adaptive skills in a typical community environment. There's no way in a prison that you were actually functioning on your own. The three areas that he did the best on in Dr. King's evaluation, so the subtests of picture completion, picture arrangement, and comprehension, those tests were removed from the WASE 4, and they tried to get rid of some of the tasks that were redundant and tasks that would have more of a practice effect. Another issue, Dr. King's higher score, the WASE 3, when they gave it, it was right before the WASE 4 came out, and so really that test needed to be renormed. Individuals do get smarter over time, and tests need to be renormed so that they accurately reflect a person's performance in relation to other people. There was clearly evidence of impairment in intellectual functioning prior to age 18. Even at the age of 30 or so, around when this crime occurred, Mr. Myers was demonstrating adaptive impairments that are consistent with a diagnosis of mild mental retardation. Those deficits continued per his former wife's report. She continued to still have to help him with things like finding transportation, helping him get up to go to work, helping him fill out applications for jobs and to read things for him. And he still couldn't do his children's homework.
My mother always was the one that did our homework with us. You know, my father, he didn't have much schooling, so he didn't really help us with our homework, but he was there. He took us to school, he walked us to the bus stop. He waited on us when we got off the bus. He was there at the bus stop waiting on us. He was the best father he can be.
I mean, he wasn't there for all of mine, but he was there for most of it. I mean, I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. I mean, all I know is he was there for us. We never had to beg for anything to eat, and we never had to, I mean, we didn't have everything in the world, but we had him and my mom, so I mean, we had us. Yeah.
Well, my dad was a big influence on that. I used to watch him play the drums for his mother's church, and I always wanted to play them. I always had a fantasy of playing them, and I've been playing ever since I was basically 9 years old. I was playing then, playing around with them, but now I'm about one of the best drummers in Decatur, I put it like that. I play for my church. I sing in the praise team. It's all glory to God that I'm where I'm at today. And, I play the drums basically, in remembrance of my father, because he played the drums and that's all I wanted to do. I just hate that he can't see me play. He never saw me play.
Just him being, happy and playing with us, and I don't know, I just don't have any memory of him being any type of violent person or, anybody that would commit any kind of crimes.
I was mad at him for a while because, like I said, I'm his only girl, and he was gone for a long time. And they took him at it when I was a young girl. And in my eyes, I don't see it like he did anything. I feel like they took my father from me. We have good conversations. He tells me that he misses me and he loves me to death. And that touches me.
I let him speak to my kids, his grandkids, and I get a little, a little happiness out of that. Even with me talking to him, it makes me feel a lot better because I don't have a vehicle to go see him. If I did, I'd have been trying to go see him. Right now, I got a whole lot of stuff on my hands. I got kids, I got a wife, and I got work, and it's hectic. He said it would be. Those are some of the last things I remember him saying to me. It's about being a man. It's gonna be a whole lot of responsibility. And it's gonna be tough once you get out on your own. And Yeah, I can say he wasn't lying. It's tough. It is. It's not enough, but it's good enough for right now, I guess. Just to be able to talk to him.
You know, I'm fortunate and blessed, you know, with the little things. You know, I have a son and a daughter that wake up every day and tell me they love me. You know, they're not ashamed of me. They think I'm the best father in the world. They actually think I'm rich. You know, it's just a good feeling to see A's and B's on your kids' report cards and see smiles on their face. If I didn't have my family, I wouldn't have nothing. And if I didn't have my father, you know, in my life, you know, talking to me, I don't even think I would be this way, because he always told me, you know, just take care of the family. And now today, he still talks to his brothers and sisters like he gonna reach out and touch them, because he gets mad at them and tell them, you know, don't do this, don't do that, you need to do this, you need to do that, you know, and they listen to him. I got family in North Carolina and South Carolina. They calls me and talks to me about their problems. And, you know, a lot of people call me the rock of the family. And I just think I get that from my father. I really do.
He used to sing and dance with me. He used to do the shuffle. He taught me how to do the shuffle. I was like 6. And I teach it to have him dance on my feet like he used to do me. It's just little things. They call me baby girl. And my angel called me baby girl. They're the only ones that call me baby girl. We got this little thing on our nose, like little things that keep them in my memories. But the sound of his voice, that means a lot.
Governor, my name is Keith Russell. I'm a former police officer in the city of Decatur. I'm a retired paramedic, also retired from legal investigations with the American Kennel Club. Years ago, I worked for a defense team involving a capital murder case here in Decatur. That case was Robin Rocky Myers. Governor, in October of 1991, Ludie Mae Tucker lived alone. Her husband was deceased. On the day of the murder, her cousin came to visit from Lawrence County, Alabama, and was sleeping over. Sometime that evening after they went to bed, around midnight, Marie Dutton heard the door knock. Her cousin went to the door, Ms. Ludie Mae. She then heard a black man talking and saying that he needed to use the phone, that he had been in a car wreck. The next thing that Ms. Dutton knew, someone flew open the door and stabbed her in the side. She then stepped out after the man fled, and she saw Ms. Tucker on the phone dialing 911. Police and the ambulance arrived within 2 minutes. Ms. Tucker went in the ambulance with the paramedics to the hospital. Ms. Dutton described the man herself as a short, stocky black man with blood on his white t-shirt. Within a few days, 3 men had come forward with information related to the murder. The police arrested a man named Anthony Cool Breeze Ballantyne. These 3 men connected Ballantyne with this murder by having bring forth a VCR from the Tucker home. That was the only item that was ever described as being stolen at the time of the murder.
After the murder had happened, Ballantyne, Breeze brought a VCR in there to say him and Breeze brought it in there by itself. And Butch gave him $20 for crack for it, and he left out the door.
Do you remember that night seeing anybody else bring any kind of equipment in or anything like that at all?
No. That night, no one else came in with any equipment.
Despite this arrest, less than a month later, the same 3 men that had given statements previously naming Ballantyne as the murderer came forward and changed their stories, stating that a man named Robin Rocky Myers had in fact committed the murder and had pawned the VCR at the local crack house. Miss Ludie Mae Tucker and Robin Myers were across the street neighbors. By all accounts, they knew one another, and Mr. Myers had been to Miss Tucker's home borrowing ice and had mowed her yard. The very day the murder occurred, Miss Dutton recounted that she and Miss Tucker had seen Mr. Myers at his home across the street. Miss Tucker had identified Mr. Myers to Miss Dutton at that time. At the trial, Mr. Myers is the only person that stated that actually Miss Tucker knew him. In spite of all this, Miss Tucker remained silent when she identified her attacker. Rather, she provided a detailed physical description down to what the attacker was wearing, when she simply could have said it was the man across the street. Mr. Myers' fingerprints were not found at Miss Tucker's home. An interesting note is Mr. Robin Myers had terrible sloughing eczema at the time of the crime, and there was much physical interaction in the home, yet nothing connected to Mr. Myers was left at the home. There was no physical evidence connecting Mr. Myers to Miss Tucker's home, period. At the time of Miss Ludie Mae Tucker's murder, this home was owned by Annie Crittenden and was run by Leon Butch Madden and his cronies. It is a shot house, and a shot house is a place that people congregate. It's an open house, people can come in and out. They sold whiskey, marijuana, beer, prostitution, drugs, stolen property, went in and out of this home as in other shot houses quite frequently. Leon Butch Madden was well known as a crack dealer in this area. He was also known as a person who you came to if you wanted to buy stolen property.
It was a place where they sold whiskey, the drugs were sold, and they did drug trades on different things like VCRs, but back then, in '91, VCRs was the hottest commodity going, but you didn't get but $20 for them.
When Mr. Myers was arrested 3 weeks after the murder, he in fact admitted that he had pawned a VCR that night at a shot house in question. Robin Myers admitted to the police when he found the VCR, he found it in this alleyway. The Decatur Police Department did not locate the VCR on their own. Rather, the brother of the woman who owned the shot house brought the VCR to the police in a trash bag. After the VCR was brought to the police, they did not go back and search the shot house to determine if there were other VCRs at that home. Multiple people were there that night at the shot house, yet only 3 identified Mr. Robin Myers. It just so happens these same 3 had previously identified Anthony Cool Breeze Ballantyne as the person that had pawned the VCR. One of these, Butch Madden, was the regular police informant and the main drug dealer at that house. The other 2 were underlings who worked for Butch Madden. Willie Reese Rabin returned to his original story prior to trial and testified that it was Anthony Ballantyne who had pawned the VCR. The third person, Marzell Ewing, testified and perhaps was the strongest testimony, as he stated he was a friend of Mr. Robin Myers.
One day we was washing the car, I think it was like on a Saturday, and Rocky walks up the way he was walking towards me, and I pointed at Butch, and he walked over there at Butch, and they did a transaction, and Rocky turned around, threw up and walked on off. When he walked off, Butch looked at me and was like, "Hey, who was that?" I was like, "Well, that's Rocky, he cool," like that. He was like, "That's the guy who brought me the VCR." I was like, "Oh," but I didn't know anything about a VCR before then, so I was like, "Oh, for real?" I just left it at that.
Butch Madden was an in-between drug dealer, in between big and small. Most people that he dealt with, they was really kind of afraid of him. He put guns, on folks and stuff like that.
The things I've done for Butch, sold drugs, watched houses, basically anything he asked, he needed at the time. Butch just said he was the one that gave him the VCR, and I just didn't have no reason to dispute it. Me and Flat Broke went to Nashville and stayed up there about a week, then didn't have a way back home. We stole it and drove it back. And we kept it around Decatur for probably about a week, and I jumped in it and went to East Acres and got caught driving it.
It was a blue and gray Blazer. Marzel Ewing was driving it. And they lost the gas cap at the gas station. And he come back. I said, the gas cap. They went back to the gas station to find the gas cap, and that's when the police pulled him over.
Well, when I got to the station, they had me in a questioning room. Boy told me that they had Butch in the next room, and that if I go back with him, then he'll take the car to on the side, back to Nashville or whatever, and tell him he found it on the side of the road. And he came and asked me, did I know anything about the murder? And I was like, well, the guy that you have is the wrong guy, because Rocky did it, and that's only because Butch had told me he was the one who brought him the VCR. So I had no reason to dispute what Butch say, because the night the police came up in Sue's house, I was way on the other end of the porch smoking and drinking. So the only thing I seen was the guy walk in, and I seen the silhouette, but I didn't pay it too much attention. And I heard my uncle, well, I call him my Uncle Butch, say the motherfucker better work. And he turned around and walked out. He said he did, and turned around and walked out. The face or silhouette, I didn't see nothing. And they let me out after that.
Since that time, Mr. Marzel Ewing admits that he was told to say it was Mr. Robin Myers during an interrogation of him by the Decatur Police Department, and following this change in story, he was never prosecuted in any shape, form, or fashion for the stolen vehicle.
Before that trial actually started, we started, in my mind, with a guilty verdict. I forget what the question was, but his answer to Bob Parole was, I feel like if a man has made it through the grand jury and to trial, that he's guilty. And he made the cut for the jury. So at that point, in my mind, I thought, how are we ever going to be able to make a fair decision if we had to have, it couldn't work if one person already went in thinking, I'm going to vote that he's guilty no matter what. And I don't know how he got in that cut, but he did. Several times during the trial, the man sitting next to me was sleeping, several times. I would have to nod and wake him up, and no one, acted like it was a big deal, but I'd nudge him. And the witnesses were all so conflicting. Their stories, you couldn't believe anybody because they changed constantly, and they would have one witness with several different stories. It was like you just had to pick which one you decided to believe. So when we got into deliberations, we couldn't even remember, because they would use their names and street names, and some of them would have 2 or 3 street names. And so when we would get in there, we didn't know who said what. And so we asked for the manuscript that we could refer back to, and it was strongly suggested that it was way too early in the game to ask for that, and that was as a last resort that we wanted to ask for anything like that. It was a lot of trouble. We felt like we were being scolded that we asked for it, so we didn't ask for it again. We didn't have anything to go on. I don't feel like the state ever proved he did anything. The only connection is that he had the VCR. That didn't make any sense. If somebody's going to find something in the bushes and sell it, That doesn't mean they killed someone. They, would use that part of the alley as a hiding place until the cops calmed down or, went away, and then they would go back and get their goods and sell them. It seemed logical to me. It didn't seem, I'm not familiar with that way of life, but it didn't sound like anything that, would be out of the ordinary. I feel like there were several people in the jury pool, or in the jury when we got back to deliberations, they had their mind made up. With it being in a southern town and the age, the population of the jury, there's a lot of people that have the mentality that if they're already on drugs, they're already stealing stuff, they're going to be guilty. If they don't think they're already guilty, then they've done something else. Their life is pretty much going to be a life of crime. The struggle was going on back there with us and deliberations, and we were kind of feeling pressure. The bailiff kind of talked to the head lady, the foreman, let her know that we needed to hurry up. I don't know what was said, but the foreman let us know that we need to hurry up. They're waiting on us. They're tired. We need to make a decision. I think there was a 3-day weekend coming up, a holiday weekend, and they wanted something. In our minds, we played out the scenarios. An innocent vote was, or not guilty vote was out of the question. It was not going to happen with the people that was back there, and we knew that. And a guilty vote could go two ways. If we voted guilty, we could recommend the death penalty, or we could vote guilty and recommend life in prison. And we kind of negotiated. We negotiated for him to go to prison for life. If he had a mistrial, he could get a jury that just found him guilty, and it would just be the death penalty, And the reason I felt so strongly about him having life in prison was because of his children. And I felt like if we could allow him that opportunity to be a father and have communication with his children, at least we could have done something good from that trial, because that's the only good that was going to come from it. And even the ones that felt like he was guilty, I don't know if they had a doubt in their mind, but if they felt like he was guilty of murdering that lady, why did they agree to say life in prison without parole? Even if I had felt he was guilty, it would have been hard. But I felt like the man was innocent, and I had to listen to this little boy cry and look at us and beg. And we were trying to give this man a connection with his children in the future, and them a connection with him. And so we did. That's how we voted. And to find out later that the judge had changed it, I was devastated. I had already told my family that I don't want to know anything else about it. If he's in the news, it had been so many years and I hadn't heard anything. So I thought, well, they did a good job. My family did a good job of keeping that from me, but now I know that nothing, they had been forgotten about. It had just been cast aside and forgotten about.
Mr. Myers was procedurally defaulted from pursuing post-conviction appeals in the federal court system because he was completely abandoned by counsel. Earl Swartz, an attorney from Tennessee who was publicly reprimanded by the Tennessee Bar for his actions in Mr. Myers' case, is the sole reason that Mr. Myers has never been allowed to pursue his claims in federal court. No court has ever heard testimony or been presented with evidence that demonstrates Mr. Myers is not guilty of the crime for which he is sentenced to die.
I don't think that Mr. Myers should be executed for something I've said. I really believe I was coached into saying that he was the one who brought it in, because I don't know for sure. I'd never seen the face, and I just don't think it's right, and I do apologize.
This case has continued to weigh on my mind for a number of years. The police made mistakes, as police officers do. I know I made mistakes. But in this particular case, a man's life is at stake. I ask that you really reach into your heart and grant this man clemency, because it's not refutable beyond all determinable guilt that this man is guilty.
I think if a judge has the power to go in after a jury has gone through what we did, if that's the way the justice system's worked up, is set up to be, then it's not justice.
My name is Dion Myers. I'm the son of Rocky Myers. I got, 4 kids, his grandbabies, and he hasn't seen any of them. I got a wife. We've been married for 4 years, been together 9. I really would like to get to see my dad and get to know him. I can't do that if you take him away from me. So I'm asking if you can, just show a little mercy. I don't know, exactly what to tell you. I don't get into the courts that much. I don't know much about it or what happened. All I know is, I don't want to see him dead. I don't wish death on anybody, but it's my dad. He made me. I don't know, what to do about it, because I don't have that type of ability, I guess. I don't know. All I know is I don't want him gone. I just want him to, live. If he have to live his life in prison, if that's, if you can do that, then, that's fine, as long as you don't have to take him away from his family or his kids.
I would like for him to meet his grandkids and get to know them, keeping their life. But I do wish that you just grant him his clemency. Just don't kill my dad.
I know the allegations that he's facing. I know the charges that he's facing, but I still believe deep down in my heart that my father is a good man. And, he loves his family. He do. He hates not being in our life. He hates the fact that where he's at is we can't really come see him all the time, and we can't really talk to him all the time. And, he didn't have the chances that I have in life. He didn't have time to be with his children. I get to see my mama every day. I get to go hug her and tell her I love her. And he really never had that chance to even say goodbye to her when she passed away. That's hard on a man. I'm asking you for clemency for Robin Myers. I'm asking you to just, extend his life for me. I can talk to him on the phone. He can tell me things that I need to know in life. And he just keeps me looking and thinking straight. You might not believe it, but he does. He tells me, all the time that you gotta be a man for your family. And if it wasn't for my father, a lot of people don't have a father to even talk to. Their fathers are, gone on with God. But I have a father that I can talk to. I have a father that is somewhere in my life. And right now I'm just asking you just to save his life.
I remember this man every day. Every day I wake up and I think about him at some time during the day. It sneaks into my mind, and it's hard. It's a burden on my heart. It's very important to me. If you'll please find it in your heart to reconsider and allow this man to have clemency. I think he is an innocent man. I have believed that from the very beginning.
It doesn't matter what I pray for or pray about, it's just the power of prayer is always on my mind, and I believe in that. I believe, when I lay down at nighttime, I thank the Lord for getting me through one day. And I pray for another day. And when I get up, when I open my eyes, I thank the Lord for letting me wake up another day. People, it's people, I tell people, I think I told you, it's people worse off than I am. And it always can be better, always. So when the judge told me that I was a threat to society, that broke my heart. That hurt me really bad because I know that I'm not, and I'm harmless. It's horrible in here. I hate it in here, but I can't do nothing about it right now. I can't. I just got to wait on the Lord, to touch you guys and to guide y'all to help me out of this. That's just not who I am. I am not that person. So the person you see is who I am. That's all true.